You count on Native Voice One for Indigenous music and stories. Now, NV1 is counting on you. Our spring membership campaign is happening now through May 3rd. Please donate today to empower Indigenous-led media and ensure Native stories continue to be heard. Thank you. Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The response to ancestors' remains recently unearthed in a number of locations indicates the vast differences in the understanding of how such situations should be handled. When construction workers encounter remains, it can set off disputes over how to proceed. Today we'll hear about different ways that officials respond depending on where they are located and how informed those involved are. That's coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. Anchorage police have identified the person found deceased last week in the Spenard area of Anchorage as 19-year-old Kelly Hunt. Police say Hunt was discovered outdoors on April 20th near the 3500 block of Lewis Drive. Next of kin have been notified. According to investigators, Hunt had arrived in Anchorage on January 6th and was staying at a residence on Oregon Drive. She left that home the following morning, January 7th. 4 days later, on January 11th, Hunt was reported missing to Anchorage police. Detectives were assigned to investigate her disappearance. More than 3 months later, officers responded to a call just before 9 a.m. on April 20th, where Hunt's body was found outside in a Spenard neighborhood. The Anchorage Police Department says the death remains under investigation. The state medical examiner will determine the official cause of death. No arrests have been made at this time. In a statement, Police Chief Sean Case acknowledged the impact of the loss, saying, quote, "We acknowledge the loss for family members and for the community. This case remains under investigation, and we ask for understanding and patience as detectives continue their work with urgency and accuracy," end quote. Police are asking anyone with information related to the case to come forward as the investigation continues. With the rise of AI, Indigenous people around the world are growing more concerned about data sovereignty. The Mountain West News Bureau's Hannah Merzbach has more on a recent conference on the topic in Tucson, Arizona.
One attendee was Bert Dillabaugh, a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe who works for an organization focused on Indigenous data sovereignty. He says at the last conference in 2024, people were still trying to understand the concept. Now, as AI scrapes data from the internet, including traditional knowledge, they're ready to take action.
Since AI is here to stay, now is the time to be planning for it before it's too late.
The mission is to protect Indigenous data, everything from genetics to language, from being exploited.
It's some outside entity, whether it be the federal government or a university or some corporation, wanting to get data from tribes.
He says tribes can protect their data with policies that govern access, or by creating systems to store it within Indigenous nations. For National Native News, I'm Hannah Merzbach.
3 tribal organizations from the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta have launched a new resource page for their ongoing salmon advocacy partnership. The Association of Village Council Presidents, the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission, and the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission have launched a partnership called the Arctic Yukon-Kuskokwim Tribal Consortium, or AYKTC, in 2002. A press release from the organization says the goal is to protect the ways of life associated with salmon by focusing on policy and advocacy rooted in science and Indigenous knowledge. The tribal organizations have shown public support for a State Board of Fisheries proposal that would reduce salmon fishing time in Area M, and have advocated for bycatch caps and migratory corridor closures in the Bering Sea pollock trawl fishery. Its new website, salmonpeople.org, serves as a center for testimonials and resources for salmon advocacy. It features a collection of news stories and accounts documenting the impact of Western Alaska salmon crashes on the lives of people who live in the region. It also aims to be a landing page where people can learn about current fisheries policies and engage in advocacy. This story was provided by KYUK's Samantha Watson. I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Construction crews on the University of California, Berkeley campus were forced to stop work on an outdoor volleyball court when they encountered ancestral remains. By state law, the process now brings in local tribal officials to determine next steps. In Canada, remains can lay exposed to the elements for years once they're unearthed. First Nations want more authority in the repatriation process, but proposed legislation could hinder that. And in Hawaii, grave protection advocates are calling for better respect and reburial of ancestral remains that are uncovered. We're looking at the wide range of disparities that persist when it comes to unearthed ancestral remains and how descendants find themselves at odds with development pressures. We'll also hear about a new effort geared toward identifying and facilitating opportunities for the return of land to tribal control. As always, listeners can join the conversation by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's now meet today's guests. Joining us from Alameda, California is Gabriel Duncan. He is the founder of the Alameda Native History Project, and he is a descendant of a federally recognized California Paiute tribe. Gabriel, good morning, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Joining us from Wailuku, Maui in Hawaii is Claire Apana. She is the president and founder of Malama Kakoni Lua. She is Kanaka Maoli. Claire, good morning to you as well, and welcome to our show.
Good morning, and aloha from Wailuku.
Aloha to you as well, Claire. Joining us from Oswego in Ontario, Canada, is Tanya Hill Montour. She is the Six Nations of the Grand River Archaeological Supervisor, and she's also Mohawk from the Six Nations of the Grand River. Tanya, hello. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to discussions today.
I am too. It's going to be a great show. And we have one more guest who also joins us today, Ava Cardenas, and she is the Director of Organizing at Indian Collective, and she is Mexica Chicana of the Masahua and Zapotec descent. Ava, hello to you as well. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you. All good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have everyone ready to go here. Gabriel, I want to begin with you. Construction workers uncovered these ancestral remains on the Berkeley campus. Work was subsequently halted. What is the status of the project now? What can you tell us?
So after they found the remains, they reached out to the county coroner, and the county coroner came and determined that the remains are historical, which means that it gets kicked up to the California Native American Heritage Commission that keeps a list of people who are determined as the most likely descendant. So those are the people associated with the area where these remains were found, and they will reach out to the person who is on that list for consultation and repatriation, hopefully.
Okay, tell us more about the California Native American Heritage Commission. Who are the people that serve on it, and what's their process to go ahead and move forward as you describe?
So the State of California Native American Heritage Commission is a commission made up of people with a tribal background. Right now, they are in charge of creating overall policy for Native American heritage, as in tribal cultural resources, Native American graves, and they're also playing a large role in the repatriation of remains from institutions like the UC Berkeley, the whole entire University of California system, as well as the state university systems. And they are a commission that is charged with keeping these most likely descendant lists, as well as a sacred lands database, where when public entities are doing these big public projects like Caltrans will work on a highway, or UC Berkeley will start to expand their area, there's a list of of people who claim this area as their ancestral territory that they must consult with prior to doing the work that they have planned.
Okay, and a note of disclosure, we did reach out to the California Native American Heritage Commission. They were not able to provide anyone for our show today. But Gabriel, give us a little bit more background on the laws and regulations that the state of California maintains for situations like this, where ancestral remains are encountered by construction projects or excavating, any other types of man-made activities.
Right. So the number one law that exists in California is the CalNAGPRA, which is the California Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And that's actually consists of two different assembly bills in California, which is AB 275 and AB 389. And these laws have been expanded in the past few years to also include, instead of only graves, also like tribal cultural resources, such as, baskets, things that are a little bit outside of funerary items, which is what's found with remains in graves, to be other cultural artifacts that are found like throughout an ancestral territory.
Okay. Tell us more about the tribes that are most likely to be descendants of these remains that were found on campus.
The area in Berkeley is its pre-contact tribal region name is Ushiun, and it is a area that has been occupied for more than 10,000 years by Ohlone people, and it's not just Ohlone people; it's a mix of Ohlone, Miwok, and Karkin people in this region, and specifically Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, which is I guess the dialect, if you want to use that word, for this area. So
Okay.
we have a few different groups, and they should all be consulted whenever remains are found or whenever people are planning big projects.
Okay. And the Alameda Native History Project, Gabriel, what's your role specifically?
I'm the founder and director. This was formed, the Alameda Native History Project was formed in 2019. It started as a research project because growing up in Alameda, I was adopted out of my tribe at birth and born and raised in Alameda, and there was nothing that I could look around and see that mentioned like Native American people at all. There was no representation. So this project really started with finding out what happened to the shell mounds in Alameda, because it didn't seem like the Alameda Museum or any other institutions had any meaningful story or meaningful information. So I had to do the research myself and find this information on my own. And that's how this project started.
Okay, thanks for that background, Gabriel. Now, going back to these remains that were encountered on campus, is there any indication or evidence that there could be more remains on campus? And how is Berkeley responding? What's the official word from the university? I'm just curious to know.
So there is absolutely a likelihood that more remains will be found. The UC Berkeley campus is built on top of an area that is a village. It's an Ohlone village, so you can definitely expect to find more remains as more deeper development goes on, because there's been a history of sort of just leveling off the ground and leaving everything underneath the surface, and that's why you'll find a lot more. And then as far as UC Berkeley's official stance, I don't know about that, but they have a lot of soul seeking to do right now, because they are the UC Berkeley is one of the largest holders of Native American remains in the Hearst Museum, and there were thousands of remains. So this sort of ties into to the scrutiny and the attention that they're getting right now for holding those remains. So hopefully they will approach this in a good way and move towards repatriation and making the situation right.
Okay. Now, we have to take a break in about a minute, but I'm just curious to know, what do you think is the likelihood that this sports complex project will ultimately move forward?
It seems pretty likely. A lot of times, asking tribes for consultation seems more of a footnote in the process or a box to check, and it's really unfortunate. But so it's likely that the sports complex would move on without any public or institutional intervention.
All right. Gabriel Duncan kicking off our conversation today. He is the founder of the Alameda Native History Project. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back and continue our conversation here. Before too much longer, just a quick underwriting break. And our phone lines, as always, are open for any listeners who would like to join the conversation today. What are your thoughts with regard to ancestral remains that are encountered? Maybe someone is building a home, or a big corporation is building a factory or some sort of large industrial facility, or maybe there's a city involved and they're doing a construction project, maybe a road, a highway, so many different types of construction projects, so much infrastructure across our country, and occasionally ancestral remains are encountered. And what happens when that occurs? Who is responsible for making those decisions? Who needs to be consulted, and to what degree? That's what we're talking about today on the show, and we're just getting the conversation started with our guests. So if you would like to join us, just give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. And when we come back from this break, we're going to hear from Claire Apana, and she is joining us from Hawaii. So stay with us, folks. Oklahoma is among states on track to scale back Medicaid coverage to its citizens. An action Cherokee Nation officials say could cost the tribe nearly $100 million in health care reimbursements annually. Hospitals and patients across the country are bracing for similar cuts that will fundamentally change how health care is administered. We'll get an update on the looming cuts on the next Native America Calling.
Who protects Indian country? Amerant does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerant helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerant is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerant.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling today. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're talking about respecting and repatriating ancestral remains that are unearthed during construction projects. You can join our conversation. Tell us what happens in your state or your community when ancestral remains are uncovered. The number to join the conversation is 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Claire Apana joins us now from Hawaii, where she is the president and founder of Malama Kakone Lua. And Claire, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And numerous encounters over the years in Hawaii that involve ancestral remains. And a national TV renovation show recently came across remains, and they included footage in one of their episodes. What are the issues around this?
Around the footage, it's against the law to show pictures of our bones in public. And these people were filming a video for selling a house and came upon the bones in the cave. And when they publicized that they were going to show it on TV, they were warned not to do that and given a restrictive order not to do it. And they did it anyway. And so now they're being sued by the state of Hawaii.
Right. The state attorney general is involved now. Tell us a little bit more about their argument and the case going forward.
Well, I think they were warned that they couldn't do it because it's against the law, and they decided to eat the fine and show the video so that they could get more readers or more watchers. Mm-hmm. So I think they're clearly wrong and selling. They sell us all the time our aloha, our islands, our beautiful beaches, etc. But making a sensation out of showing our burials is really way across the line. And I'm glad that they're going to face some consequence.
Well, you mentioned earlier that what they did was illegal. And of course, with the attorney generals involved, that's obviously, going to be determined here going forward. But tell us more about these laws and procedures specifically that protect ancestral remains found in Hawaii. What do they permit? What do they forbid? And what are ultimately the consequences for folks that violate these laws?
Right. The consequences are very small. I think those people are facing like $10,000 per incident, or I don't know if they're counting each time they've shown it or each bone that they filmed. But to me, that's relatively small, a very small consequence. The laws in Hawaii, we have our own state burial laws, and our environmental laws, which also touch into the protection of our ancestral burials. But we also follow federal laws in the cases where federal projects, money, or lands are involved. And I'm really sad to hear that in California they're going to be able to go forward with that project and be able to go over the NAGPRA, NAGPRA laws that would give the decision to descendants. Mm-hmm. So we do have those laws here. How are they enforced? Not very well. If enforced at all. Okay. And we have we were successful in having our petition for making rule changes to these laws accepted by our Department of Land and Natural Resources last Friday. And the reason we did it is because the process is so unclear and arbitrary. So one person may be treated a certain way and another a different way. The reason we did this is because we've been in a contested case with the Grand Wailea Resort, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, resort on Maui. And it is owned by Blackstone, and we were able to get they had to do some work underneath the kitchen. And this kitchen floor has been in there for 40 years. And we were able to get them to do it by hand, to excavate by hand. And when they did that, they went down about 2 feet, and they disturbed burial or bones. They, in building the hotel, they disturbed a lot of burials already. So many of these burials are not intact anymore because they just bulldozed them. But but what happened was they did not let the descendant that came forward take care of the burial.
Claire, I want to ask you more about, because you mentioned, a big resort, right? And it's no secret that there's considerable pressure to accommodate Hawaii's tourist industry and also the infrastructure that supports it. Do you see any way to balance those industrial and development ambitions with respect for cultural ancestral remains of your ancestors there in Hawaii?
I am really in favor of getting prior approval so that you can be in a place that's not sensitive, that's not a burial ground. I mean, if they would only stop building in places where you expect that you will find remains of our people, that would be a really big start. But that does not happen in Hawaii. Blackstone's a big company, right?
Right.
So they've kind of been let go with a lot of things, like decreasing the number of burials stated on the property by hundreds, and it's to make it look like there's not a lot of burials when it is an actual burial site. And then what is typical is that they say the mitigation is they'll have an archaeological monitor on each piece of equipment. So that means they expect to find something, and by the time the monitor finds it, they have already disturbed the burial or the remains. So we are not in favor of the way it is done in Hawaii by our state historic preservation department.
Okay.
And
Claire, these archaeological monitors that are assigned to each piece of equipment, these are people, right? These are who are they, and what are their qualifications, and what is their sincerity with regard to making sure it's accurate?
Because of the Lahaina fire, they were able to train and have many descendants be archaeological monitors, but it is not from that pool that they are required to take them. They actually let almost anybody be an archaeological monitor, and it is really up to the archaeologist and the resort to choose. And of course, they do not want to find anything. I mean, I have encountered a person who just graduated from college, being a monitor with no experience at all, or any archaeological degree, being, who found remains and didn't quite know what to do with it. We just happened upon this person and asked her if she had a permit. She had just encountered some remains and was kind of like, well, I don't know what to do with this.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And so, it can be that way. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get it so that they will be trained as the Lahaina monitors have been trained with deeply in cultural awareness and knowledge, as well as, to find people who are descendants of the area.
1-800-996-2848. You can join this conversation. Tell us your thoughts with regard to what you're hearing today about these various construction projects in which ancestral remains are encountered and the subsequent activities and actions that take place afterwards in terms of figuring out how to move forward. 1-800-99-NATIVE. That is the number. Let's head back east now, quite a ways east, all the way to Ontario, Canada, where we have Tanya Hill Montour on the line, and she is the Six Nations of the Grand River Archaeological Supervisor. And Tanya, ancestral remains were uncovered at a private home site near Toronto a couple of years ago. Can you give us an update on where the city and First Nations are in the process of either repatriation or reburial?
Good morning. So yes, in regards to Toronto with Withrow Avenue, it's basically, our protocols are similar to, some of the discussion pieces today where, the coroner comes into the office, into the site, they determine if it's, criminological or if it's archaeological. So we have two cases right now, also with Wainfleet. I just want to kind of acknowledge that because they both have similarities. And when it comes to how far we are today, and those similarities are, it's once, that protocol comes in place, the coroner's office comes, then it's turned over to the First Nations. They are notified directly from the coroner's office. And what I want to acknowledge about that piece is that's new. That's only within the last couple of years that we are actually notified. Prior to that, the notification process was not there at all. So Withrow, along with Wainfleet, they're both sitting now with the burial authorities of Ontario. So once the process comes through the coroners to the First Nations communities, then the bereavement authorities, the burial registrar of Ontario takes over. Once that process happens, that's where we stop, and everything sits, and it's like, okay, who's going to pay for this? So it's very disrespectful. It's financially based, whether it be on the city or whether it be on the homeowner. So in regards to Withrow in particular, we are now moving forward for reburial, interment. We have went into the site, which is like underneath a sidewalk. So just some context for where the ancestors were uncovered, where they were underneath a sidewalk. They were doing a water main upgrade. So 4 individuals were unearthed at the time. And now, rewarding and fast forwarding a little bit, we are now to the 2 years later where we're looking for interment this coming summer. Yeah. There's a lot in between there, like a lot of frustrations from, our communities. But, we're there now. Right.
Tanya, I want to ask you more about the cost associated with this, because you mentioned, does it fall upon the homeowner? Is it the responsibility of a municipal government or a provincial government? And I understand in some situations it could potentially cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, to do the archaeological work and whatever else needs to occur in order to move forward. Who is ultimately responsible for that?
It's usually the homeowner, and in this particular case with Withrow in Toronto, it was the city of Toronto, which I find is with the new amendments that are coming through Ontario, I really find it real challenging and also concerning because, if they want to streamline development, then, the government should be helping take responsibility for, disrespectfully unearthing our ancestors due to the fact that it becomes such a financial burden. So when it does get to that, Burial Authorities of Ontario, the BAO, you can submit a financial document to state, do I qualify for funding for the burial site? So in Withrow in particular, the City of Toronto obviously had to put it into their budget, which come out of taxpayer dollars. And then with the Wainfleet, it was a homeowner who now is responsible for the cost, and it's that's the huge burden there. That's the barrier where nothing happens, right? So I think that the government needs to take some further responsibility in assisting and supporting.
And Indigenous people where you are, how do they feel about what's happening and specifically how these remains are being treated? Again, I mean, this is a couple of years ago that these remains were uncovered.
All communities at large here in Ontario, we have 131 different nations, and just in Ontario, just in our Great Lakes, and we're all concerned, and we're all more concerned now because we continually, are left with no answers, and it's concerning now because all of this is turned over for best practices from, a governmental perspective. There's no First Nations voice there, right? And as I mentioned, we're starting to slowly get there, but the communities they're very concerned, and they're more concerned because these bills are streamlining, and it's going to be lack of involvement again. So we're really, we're running on a hamster wheel.
All right. We're going to take another break. We'll come back. We'll talk more with Tanya Hill-Montour, and we're also going to be joined by Ava Cardenas with the Indian Collective as well. So stay with us, listeners. And for those of you who would like to join the conversation today, we do have the phone line still open. There's plenty of time for anyone who would like to chime in here with today's discussion. Again, we are talking about respecting and repatriating ancestral remains that are unearthed during construction projects. And maybe you're familiar with a situation like this in your own community or with your own tribal lineage, and you'd like to join our conversation and share some of your perspectives. You can do that. You just have to pick up your phone and call us. The number again, 1-800-996-2848.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Kaufman & Associates is a Native-owned and led consulting firm supporting Native communities with culturally grounded solutions to shape Indigenous futures. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're continuing our conversation about respecting and repatriating ancestral remains found at construction sites. Still time to join us, 1-800-996-2848, for listeners who would like to share their thoughts and insights and perspectives with regard to today's topic. Again, that number, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Tanya Hill-Montour is the Six Nations of the Grand River Archaeological Supervisor, and she's speaking with us today from Ontario, Canada. And Tanya, we've talked about NAGPRA a couple of times already during the conversation with other guests, and I'm curious to know more about its equivalent in Canada, similar type of regulations that protects graves and ancestral remains. What can you tell us?
Yeah, NAGPRA, Ontario in particular, which I work in, Canada at large, we do not have a NAGPRA. We did meet in Manitoba, Ontario, Canada about 2 years ago to discuss, what a NAGPRA could look for Canada, but that was it. It just got to a discussion piece, and we never moved forward with anything else, like no written legislation or regulations or policy in no matter. So right now we kind of work alongside it because that's probably the next thing is, okay, what does Ontario, Canada do? What does the archaeology supervisor do to move through this barrier with there's no guidance. Currently, the ministry, they call it the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for, Ontario. They are the ones who hold the GIS. They are the ones who hold the standards and guidelines of what archaeology should look like. So we kind of work along, their purview, which is really challenging, again, because that purview ultimately states what is determined cultural heritage and value and interest for Ontario. And that's a really challenging piece when you're not, you're a governmental agency making these decisions, and you're not coming from a First Nations perspective or a First Nations, protocol. So right now we're really struggling with this, and it's, again, we're getting run over with some new bills that are coming through. So it's really challenging. I'm trying to, keep myself at the table with discussions with that and what this could look like. But, that's the concerning part, is right now we don't have a NAGPRA for Ontario, Canada.
Okay. And the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism that you mentioned earlier, how would you rate the level of consultation right now between that entity and First Nations groups such as yourself?
Well, that's another concerning part. We have many barriers in Ontario, Canada, and we just kind of keep ourselves poking through every hole that we can in all the gray area, because I noticed today a lot of the conversations going around a lot of gray area when it comes to policy and legislation or just respect, right? So right now, like the level of consultation is just starting to happen last year, and we never really had no communication with the ministry before that. They created the standards and guidelines. They created a bulletin called the Aboriginal Bulletin for Consulting Archaeologists. So that bulletin was always left in draft since 2012, because 2012, 2010, somewhere around that time period is when these standards and guidelines for archaeologists was created, right? Like, how do we mitigate a site? What are the best practices? What are the protocols? This is the guidance for, those consulting archaeologists. But there was no conversation of how would the First Nations communities like to see these protocols or these guidelines operate, right? There was no consultation at all. So currently we have been in conversations, many of the nations, again, across Ontario, and we were very vocal. We stated what we would like. And then it come back to us within the last few months that, what we wanted still isn't going to change. So back to this bulletin again. This bulletin tells, and gives guidance to the archaeologists of when to call First Nations communities. When do we call the First Nations community in for consultation? That comes out of stage 3. And what we're not really understanding is, like, there's stages 1 to 4. So if you can only imagine, First Nations communities are engaged at the stage 3, which is the latter part of the studies. Okay, well, what happened with stage 1 and 2? What happened about planning, right? So that's really concerning and such a barrier for us.
Okay. Tanya, we're going to move on here in just a moment, but I also just can't get over just the colonial tone to some of these government entities that you're describing, the Ministry of Citizenship and Aboriginal Bulletin. I mean, even just that, just the naming and the titles of some of these entities that you're dealing with just seems like it's very much, that old royal type of colonial mindset dating all the way back to the Crown.
Yes, I agree. It's a lot of cultural harm.
Okay. All right. Tanya Hill-Montour joining us from Ontario, Canada. Appreciate her on the show as well. Ava Cardenas is our next guest. She is the Director of Organizing at Indian Collective, and we're going to pivot a little bit now and talk about a new campaign titled the Land Back Action Network. And Ava, welcome to the show again, and tell us more about the goal of this initiative.
Thank you so much for having me. Before I do that, I just wanted to extend all of my gratitude, respect, and love to the relatives that are also on this call, because the work that you all are doing is so important in so many ways, in so many respects, and it's very reflective of how this sort of Land Back Action Network has come to be. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you all so much for the work that you all are holding, and sending you all so much love and strength from this part. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, we are super excited to announce the launch of the Land Back Action Network, which is a membership-driven network that seeks to create sort of a political home for Indigenous communities, nations, organizers, allies, accomplices, and folks who are seeking to fight against the extraction policies that are very clear that these different corporations and government officials are set on doing. We recognize the need for people to have access to not just resources, but to also have a space where they can create a political home, a space where they can sharpen their skills and where they can share information with one another. We recognize the power of building people power and organizing through relationships. And so the Land Back Action Network is a new initiative from NDN to create such space. We are super excited to be launching during Earth Week because we recognize, as folks have named in this call, the importance of our people being consulted around projects and other programming that these governments have tried to push for profit at the discardment of our own people or cultures and traditions. And so, we have a website that we have officially launched. It's landback.org for folks to get more information as to how they can join and be part of this network. But yeah, super exciting. We have a lot to offer, and we know that our community has a lot to offer, that our people hold a lot of knowledge and culture and traditions that we share across, and that, some of our fights, if not every fight that we have, is interconnected. And so the importance of us building across territories and nations. But yeah.
I'm looking at the website right now, Ava. I see there's a podcast component to it, as well as other rich media content. Tell me a little bit more, though, about how it's different in terms of the approach and the scope than what Indian Collective has already been doing for a number of years.
Yeah, we have been doing a lot of work to support the ongoing efforts from our different communities. And so we recognize that work has and will continue to be done. We also recognize that we're in a particular moment in the history of this nation, the history of the people that live in this land. The contradictions are coming very clear with the not just the wars, but also the dismantling of any sense of protections for our territories and their lands, and we're seeing sort of the amplification of that. And so the approach with having and creating this network is to be able to provide people a space where, because of the work that they are already doing, because of the knowledge and experience that they hold about the fights within their own homelands and territories, that information is super important for people, for communities to talk about, to think about strategy. And we want to be able to create that as an addition of building capacity and building infrastructure for our communities. We want to invite everyone to check out our website, read about our principles and our vision in terms of how we're seeking to defend, develop, and decolonize. Because we believe that we hold a particular a power in this particular moment in our history, as we are seeing, the pricing of energy, the mining of materials, the exploitation not just of people, but also the commodification of that. And it is upon us to be able to get more informed, to be able to seek community, and to be able to build what we know is possible. And so our approach is to be able to create an additional space so that people can continue to sharpen their skills, to build more tools, and to create relationships that will get us further to our liberation.
All right. Thank you, Ava. Let's talk about the role that Indian Collective had with regard to a high-profile visit by President Donald Trump to Mount Rushmore. Very instrumental in that whole action. What is the future strategy for raising awareness about that location and other lands in the Black Hills in South Dakota?
I mean, I think right now what we're seeing and what other folks have named on this call is sort of that continual colonial tactic of not having any type of form of actual meaningful consultation, of seeking actual consent from our peoples. I think our people are very aware of what those situations look like within all of our territories. I think right now, as we're seeing the attacks again, our sacred sites, our burial grounds, for the sort of benefit of what they call progress. I think that our people understand that. Our people have been fighting against that. I think the role of Indian Collective, as any other organization and any other movement, infrastructure, organization and communities that are seeking that, is to provide spaces for people to be informed, for people to find ways in which they can engage and in which they can defend their territories. It is our right to fight for our territories. It is the right for us to have clean drinking water. And I think working class people, whether they're indigenous or not to these lands, understand that. And our role as organizations and nonprofits and other sort of those kinds of models is to support the development and the building of power of indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm. Ava, what's the atmosphere right now for groups like yours, grassroots organizations that are really boots on the ground? I mean, you use the term fight numerous times with regard to what your mission is. And of course, right now, the U.S. Justice Department is targeting certain civil rights and social justice organizations. How are you folks responding to that?
I think it's also deeper than that. It's not just organizations like us. I think in particular, the government has used different policies and different agencies to attack anyone that goes against what they're trying to sell the working class people of these lands. So I think it's important for us to understand, like, the attacks on press that we have seen, to the use of these different task force and these different government agencies to go after folks who might question the validity and the truth of things that are being told to us on general. I think that is very, it shows very clearly how much this regime is seeking to use authoritarianism to, again, go against First Amendment rights and the civil rights of working class people here. And it is important for people to get informed as to why dissent happens and why people should dissent when there are unjust laws or unjust movements that are happening that impact not just indigenous people, right, but working class people. And we are seeing that through the budget cuts. We are seeing that through the cuts to any social services and the funding of paramilitary forces and the funding of wars that make no sense. When we see politicians alike, businessmen talk about the profit that they're making, people need to remember that that profit is for them. It is not for the working class people. Working class people are struggling to make ends meet. And so as people become more clear in understanding those contradictions and start to question, we have seen the tactic that this government, as the colonial tactic, has used to label people that they don't like as other or as terrorists and sort of use the law to fight back against dissent. And so I think it's important for people to understand where we are in this moment and the importance of organizing, the importance of getting informed, the importance of becoming active in our communities so that we can protect one another.
All right. And with that, we're going to have to wrap up our conversation today, but really appreciate Ava Cardenas, who joins us from Indian Collective and talking about this new Land Back initiative. It's called the Land Back Action Network, and the website is landback.org. And we had other guests who joined us in the show today, and we also appreciate them as well. Gabriel Duncan, Claire Apana, and Tanya Hill-Montour. And with that, we are going to wrap up the conversation, but we'll be back again tomorrow when we hear about looming cuts to Medicaid eligibility and what that means for tribes and individual patients. You can listen back to this show and all previous episodes of Native America Calling at our website, nativeamericacalling.com, or just visit your favorite podcast platform, and you can hear a recording of this show as well. And don't forget to post, comment, and like about today's show on our various social media platforms. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads, or just the website, nativeamericacalling.com. I'm Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, share progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiver-resources. AARP supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.